Welcome back to the Drive to Dayton podcast. I'm your co-host, Michael Roth, alongside TJ Peatross. And TJ, we got one last weekend to drive. We've made it all the way to state championship weekend in Dayton. But first, we've got a very busy Final Four weekend to recap. So let's not waste any time. And I mean, let's start off with your games on Friday night, a doubleheader at Wittenberg. Just how crazy was that environment?
Man, so the first game of the day down in Wittenberg on Friday was the Maysville Cincinnati Wyoming game. Definitely a game that I was looking forward to a lot. I had very high expectations for it, and man, I feel like it's few and far between when you have such high expectations for a game, and then that game is able to somehow surpass where you thought it could go. This was just an absolute thriller, double overtime game, capped off with the Gator Nichols three at the buzzer. The Maysville faithful showed out. Man, they showed up 90 minutes early. So I left straight from work to drive down to Wittenberg. I got down there around 4 o'clock. I drove by the gym, on my way to get some coffee, and man, the Maysville crowd made Wittenberg look like Best Buy on a Black Friday. It was just absolutely insane that these people were lined up early. I mean, this line of people was just snaking around the whole front entrance of the school. But phenomenal game. The first half was like a little sloppy, right? I think it was like 22-22. But man, that second half and both overtimes were it was unbelievable. Both teams just trading shot for shot, big plays after big plays. I thought junior Kellen Wiley from Wyoming was probably one of his best games that I've seen from him in quite some time. Devin Evans made some big shots, big plays down the stretch. But man, Maysville, they got it done again. And a pretty cool tidbit that I saw on Twitter that just kind of blew my mind was last year on March 14th, 2024, Gator Nichols makes an inbound pass to Alex Bob, who banks in a three from the wing to win the regional semis, move on to the regional final. Exactly 1 year later, almost to the exact time, Alex Bob hit his shot at 7:17 p.m. Gator Nichols made his game-winning three at 7:15 p.m. on the same exact day, exactly 1 year later. Just absolutely incredible game. Cool story from Maysville to see those guys make that trip down to UD again. And they play Cleveland Glenville in a game that we'll talk about in a little bit. But yeah, it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, the stuff you couldn't write in a Hollywood script from Maysville. I mean, just absolutely unbelievable. Did you see the TikTok that Maysville made? I think it was today or yesterday.
Oh, with the superintendent and there's a gator on the loose. Yeah, it was pretty funny.
Yep,
Uh,
no school for all the Maysville students on Friday, so make sure you get to UD Arena early because I'm sure they'll be packing the place out.
oh, they absolutely will, man. And then the second game of the doubleheader at Wittenberg was Columbus Academy against Summit Country Day out of Cincinnati. If you would have told me going into this game that Jason Singleton would be 3 of 9 from the floor and only have about 8 or 9 points on the day, like I would have probably told you I really liked Summit Country Day's chances to win that game and move on to the state final. But man, the seniors from Columbus Academy, Anderson Davis and Theo Falkenhayn, they just came up huge. I believe Falkenhayn went 8 of 9 from the field with 20 points. Phenomenal performance from him. I thought the role guys stood up and really stood up and showed out in the game where Singleton and sophomore Caden Ivory didn't really have great showings, but Columbus Academy is rolling. This is a team that we saw. I believe that was back in December or early January. I forget. Um, but yeah, not a team that I thought would be in contention, but not a team that I would have pegged right back then as a team capable of winning it all. But fast forward to March, and they look like a team that can absolutely beat Lutheran East. and we'll talk about it in a little bit. But man, they might be a slight favorite with the way that they've been playing as of late.
Yeah, I wanted to see either Summit Country Day or Columbus Academy in the state championship game. Was not going to get both with the way the bracket shaped out, but glad I'll get to see one at UD Arena because I spent Thursday up in Cleveland for the MAC tournament quarterfinals, saw four games there. And then Sunday, we saw a triple header at the Canton Memorial Fieldhouse, three fantastic games that all went down to the final shot. We'll start with the opening game of the day, Division One powerhouses, Olentangy Orange and St. Ignatius. And this game, Orange was in control the whole first half. Their defense did an excellent job making St. Ignatius work for everything. RJ Jones and Damon Fryery were the only Wildcats to score a field goal in the first half. And this game flipped when Fryery scored 6 points in the final second and a half of the third quarter to trim an 8 point deficit to a 2 point deficit. I thought that St. Ignatius pair of Division One commits in Fryery and Quinn Wodke made some huge plays in the fourth quarter and in overtime. They showed why they were state champions last year. I mean, they did not have their best effort in the first two quarters and 7 minutes and 58 seconds of the game. But those final 2 seconds of the third quarter and the fourth quarter, the Wildcats looked like the state title team that won it last year. Even though there were some new names, new faces making plays, you saw why they were state champions last year. You mentioned it at the game. I thought Cam Joyce made some great defensive adjustments, throwing double teams, not letting Olentangy Orange sort of pick apart the Wildcat defense. It seemed like they were a little rushed by Ignatius sort of gamble and scramble mentality, double team the ball, and then we'll rotate behind. And that definitely gave Olentangy Orange some trouble. And it looked like they were maybe going to lose the game after they botched back to back 2-on-1 situations. But it ended up being too much Pioneers. Levi Davis and Keegan Nutt made some big plays in overtime. And Devin Brown, who had a big first half, the double team got the ball out of his hands and he needed the role guys to step up, and step up they did for Coach Kalo and company. And they're headed to Dayton for the state championship game.
Yeah, I thought the adjustments that Cam made in the second half were huge. So he kind of went to a bit of a press and just kind of run and jump a little bit there in the second half. And I thought it flustered Orange a little bit. It looked like they, were kind of sped up, kind of took them out of the flow that they had offensively. And then when you look at Devin Brown, who, especially in that first quarter, was just an absolute handful, was getting 2 feet in the paint whenever he wanted to. Instead of sending just an automatic double team at him, they waited for him to attack. As soon as he put the ball on the ground, then they sent the guy at him. Really kind of took him out of it in the second half. And then that huge, just momentum shifting third quarter at the very end, it looked like a game that St. Ignatius was going to win. I feel like I said it watching the game. It was like, this does not feel like Orange is going to walk away from this as a victor. But sure enough, man, those guys just a lot of resiliency showed by the Pioneers. And like you mentioned, man, the role guys stood up. I thought the one sequence that was really big was Levi Davis. I believe they might have been down four. Olentangy Orange was. Levi Davis hits a catch and shoot three in the corner. Right now they're down one. They get a stop, and then Levi Davis, quick drive, drop off to Keegan Up, who throws down a big dunk to put them back up one. That felt like, all right, these guys are settled back in, and they're starting to make plays again. But yeah, there was a pretty good amount of time in that second half where it felt like Ignatius was going to win the game.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what you wanted from a D1 state Final Four game. I mean, high level basketball. And we'll move over to the D2 game, which I think both me and you had pretty low expectations for. And the enjoyment level of that game far exceeded what I thought I was getting walking into the gym. I'll let you take the reins talking about Stark County's Cinderella story, Massillon Perry. They're still dancing.
Man, shout out to Coach Vol over there, man. It seems like no matter where he's gone, whether it was Carrollton, Perry, I believe there may have been a stop in New Philly for him as well along his coaching journey. But this guy just seems to win no matter where he goes. We're talking about a Perry team that had lost four of their last five games going into the tournament, and now have rattled off, I believe, five or six in a row, and have found themselves in the Division II state championship game. Um, and that was another game where like I thought Perry did just enough to hang around, and it felt like it was a matter of time before North Royalton was going to pull away. They were up four, or up six, or up eight. Anytime the Perry would get it close, somebody from North Royalton would, hit a couple shots, and then now the game is back out to six or eight. But man, shout out to those guys at Perry. I thought senior Luke Wolf, uh, man, I haven't seen that kid since he was a sophomore. But seeing him now as a senior, I think he's just extremely versatile. Bit like of a point forward for them. I mean, he rebounded it at a really high level, pushed a break, initiated offense for them, moved and worked without the ball as a catch and shoot threat. I thought defensively he was really good, just quick hands, a lot of deflections and strips and steals and blocks, including a pretty much like a game-saving deflection towards the end. North Royalton would have had a chance to, I believe, tie it or go up. And I thought he had a big time deflection and ended up forcing a turnover. But man, there was a moment in that game where senior, I'm blanking on his first name. What was
Darnell.
McLeod? Man, so McLeod comes down the lane, and he was a kid that you could kind of tell in warm-ups, and he had a couple flashes throughout the game where you could see the athleticism. But man, he just gets downhill, and man, he just put on a show at the rim. And that when I tell you that place erupted, guys, if you weren't there, it's pretty hard to even try to put it in words. But phenomenal environment, a much better game that I had anticipated. I thought both teams just like played aesthetically pleasing basketball, right? Like offense was great, ball was moving, players were moving, shots were going in. It was a good pace, good tempo to the game. It was a lot of fun, and man, we honestly we went 3 for 3 on Sunday, and I had hyped up the field house on here. I had hyped up the field house on Twitter. There was a good amount of people coming from, other areas that had never been to a game in the field house. And I think it definitely lived up to the expectations. And I know that field house isn't UD or it's not St. John's or any of those places that have, more history as far as like hosting the tournament goes. But when you talk about a Final Four game in front of almost 5,000 people, sold out, place is absolutely rocking. As a student athlete, I don't think you could ask for a much better experience than that.
No, I mean, like you mentioned, that Division two game, it seemed like it was two teams that had won four playoff games in a row, were playing with confidence. Both teams were trying to score, like they weren't trying to sort of move the ball around or hold it. Like they were both trying to attack, and they played with a lot of confidence. Like these are two teams who felt like they belonged on this big stage that they were given, and I mean they delivered. So. I had a great time at the field house. I mean, you've been there probably 10 times more than I have, but wasn't my first time, won't be my last at the field house watching big time basketball. And that third game, the Stark County Magic, you just can't count out the Louisville Leopards. I mean, they had probably 90% of the fans in attendance were rocking the teal blue of the Leopards. And despite being down 11 with 6 minutes to go, Louisville finds a way, closes on a 12-0 run, and they're headed down to UD Arena. So the Leopards are going to be taking the highway all the way to UD.
And that was a game that, I believe Garfield was up 9 going into the final frame. I thought Marcus Johnson, who looked every bit like Mr. Basketball in that game, had a huge third quarter. It seemed like he didn't miss a ball in that quarter, if I'm being honest. I mean, whether it was catch and shoot three, off the dribble three, I mean, he had like a one-legged step back off, from 17 feet that went. I mean, he was rolling. Garfield was rolling. I thought senior Devon Jackson hit a couple shots in that third quarter. Um, and man, it felt like Garfield was in control. Fourth quarter starts. Garfield starts the quarter off. They run about a minute or so off the clock, and then they get a wide open layup to go up 11 with about six and change left. And at that point, it felt like, that game was slightly out of reach, not just from the deficit standpoint, but just the fact that it seemed like Garfield had all the momentum. You got the best player on the floor. You got an 11-point lead. Your guys are rolling. Your guys are making shots. Um, and then they tried to do what they did in the Archbishop Hoban game. So they got up late on Hoban. They actually did a really good job of running clock, spacing the floor out, killing some time. End up pulling away and winning that game. They tried a similar approach with Louisville, and it just did not, end with the same result. They had about 3 or 4 consecutive turnovers that resulted in, Louisville baskets. I mean, I remember one point, I think Bo Siegfried hit like a wing three in transition, and my ears were ringing for a good minute after he made the shot. Like
So
it was so loud in there. I couldn't hear myself think.
that play was so interesting because Garfield had been trying to milk the clock, take the game away, turn the ball over. Siegfried hits the three. Louisville's still down two. They don't have the ball. There's 2 minutes left. You don't feel like that's a great spot. Down two, don't have the ball, 2 minutes left. The Louisville student section were waving goodbye to Garfield like they had already won the game. Like that's how confident they were in that run. Like they felt after that moment, they were like, yeah, like we're just going to do this. And then the next possession, turnover, Avery Andrachik hits a three off a great jump pass by Braden Gross, who was absolutely dominant on the interior, had 3 defenders in the paint with him, kicks it out to the Leopards' sixth man and senior confident shot makes it last points of the game, put Louisville up 49-48. And that was all she wrote after a couple of really deep shots by Marcus Johnson to close out the game. They didn't really get any good looks at the basket, which was a major difference versus Hoban when they were trying to bleed out the clock. It ended in dunks and layups at the rim or floaters from Marcus, where on Sunday against Louisville, it ended in turnovers or contested shots. Like they started overthinking the game where they had it like an open 3-pointer and then they took like a contested 10-footer because they didn't want to take a three. But if your feet are set, sometimes that's a good shot, especially if you're going for the kill and you're up in the fourth quarter. If you make a time and space three, that can be so deflating to the team that's trailing.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I know Matt Gould has voiced on Twitter, very great point too. So I don't remember if it was the third or fourth quarter, but Marcus Johnson took like a pretty hard fall, and definitely like on the video replay, like I mean he hit his head pretty good, um, and it seemed like for the last few minutes of that game, he was almost kind of checked out. It almost made me wonder like was he still kind of recovering from the fall because outside of those, that last second heave, he had very, very few looks in that, in that fourth quarter when they needed a bucket. So that was something that, I didn't really notice, during the actual game, but after the fact, yeah, it just kind of made sense and lined up. But yeah, shout out to Louisville. They move on to play Cincinnati Aiken in the D3 state championship game. I believe that's the first game of the weekend and what's going to kick us off on Friday at 1 p.m. So, yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. There was also a triple header down at Wright State that neither me or Roth were at, obviously. Um, Quick recap of those games. Reynoldsburg knocked off Lakota West 64-63 in a game that looked like Reynoldsburg just had absolutely no business winning. Culminated in a wide open layup for junior Xavier McKinney to win it off of a baseline out of bounds set. I had no clue how he got as open as he did. I'd love to see a different angle on that, but it seemed like the play wasn't even designed for X. It was designed to go somewhere else, and Damon Griffin just said, "Oh crap, this guy's open." Pass it to him, boom, layup to win the game. In a game where we were following the updates as close as we could, and it felt like Lakota West was going to win it. It's like this,
Absolutely.
yeah, this Reynoldsburg team is just. It seems like they just have played just the most hectic and ridiculous games so far in this tournament.
I tweeted
And
about it. They were down 13. Actually, they were down 15. I had a Hilliard Bradley parent correct me. I thought they were only down 13 in the second quarter. They were down 15 points in the second quarter against Bradley. They were only up one with 3 minutes to go versus Dublin Kaufman. They were down six versus Olentangy Liberty with a minute 20 to go in overtime. And they were down four versus Lakota West with 20 seconds left. Like those, your odds of winning all those games, extremely, extremely low. But credit to Reynoldsburg. They've been a hard team to kill. You just can't kill them when they get down and they turn up the defensive pressure. Somehow, some way, they've been finding ways to turn you over and score at the rim in transition and figure out a way to keep on moving on. Like they're in the state title game by kind of a miracle, but also you got to tip your cap because they're going out and they're earning it at the end of the games. When plays had to be made, they made plays every single time.
one thing that I saw in that San Ignatius game, particularly in the second half with Olentangy Orange, uh, they had me, looking at the Reynoldsburg matchup a little differently was just watching how Olentangy Orange struggled at times with that pressure in the press, whether it was just like well timed or Cam just did a really really good job of getting his guys to execute that, but definitely looked like Orange had some deficiencies there in terms of just taking care of the ball, not getting sped up versus that pressure. And I mean, Orange isn't a we talked about this. Orange isn't a team that particularly shoots the ball very well. Obviously they have a few guys that can make shots, but yeah, there's some interesting narratives. I'll be curious to see which approach these two coaches take, and we're looking at a game in Division One that I think is as hyped up as those Pick Central Centerville matchups that we got just a few years ago.
Absolutely. I mean, I was talking about it with you and Coach Kalo, and I think the three most tight state title games in D1 since I've been here have been Pick Central versus Centerville, St. Vincent St. Mary versus Moeller, and this one, Brownsburg versus Orange. And I think Brownsburg versus Orange is probably one or two. So should be a rocking environment at UD Arena. Should be a lot of fun. The two other games at Wright State, Aiken battled it out with Sandusky. They eventually got up, I think, 16 points. Sandusky cut it closer at the end, but Aiken was able to hold on. And then Westerville North continues. They're running through Division Two, not making anything look competitive. Every single game has been won by over 20 points. Their latest win by 21 over Toledo St. Francis. So shout out to Westerville North. They are taking care of business at a high level and leaving no doubt about where they rank amongst the state's elite because their only two losses this year on the road to Olentangy Orange and on the road to St. Ignatius. Those are two of the five best teams in the state. I mean, Westerville North would have been right there in the old four division format in Division One. I mean, that's the level of team that they have this year. And I mean, they are making the Division Two bracket look like a joke.
Yeah, they are. I mean, we talked about this before, but looking at what the old format would look like given this year's group of teams, and gosh, man, it's hard to not imagine how much fun Columbus would be in Division One, especially when you get to like district finals, regional semis. I mean, you're looking at a regional semi doubleheader of Olentangy Orange, Reynoldsburg, Westerville North, Olentangy Liberty. I mean, that would have been a blast. Would have been a lot of fun. I will say, I obviously have not been a huge advocate for the seven division format, but I also have to take my bias out of it and call it how I see it. Man, we've gotten a lot of really good games. Down the stretch here of this tournament. I thought it got off to a little bit of a rocky start those first couple rounds. But I thought things picked up pretty quickly once we got to the regionals, and it hasn't really slowed down at all. I think we're going to get a lot of really competitive games. When I look at the state championship matchups, I don't see too many potential games that I feel like are going to, be too lopsided. If I'm being honest, I don't.
I agree. I think this tournament has for sure exceeded expectations than what I thought we were going to get for the opening year of the seven division format. I don't think it's perfect by any means. I think you'll probably see a couple changes next year. Not exactly sure what, but it won't be, I don't think it'll be identical to what you saw this year. I think they definitely learned some things about the Final Four locations, whether that be for the boys or the girls, figuring out different locations when the girls are playing Final Fours, boys are playing regional title games, figuring out how to balance the Final Four locations for that Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I think the one thing I would have really liked is if that Cornerstone and South Webster game, if that would have been a double header with Lutheran East and Minford in Columbus, I probably would have went, but I just didn't want to make the drive for one game each night down to Columbus, and the other game was at St. Clairsville on Saturday. So I wonder if maybe in the future they try to limit the one and done sort of Final Four games because those were the only two one and done Final Four games. The other locations, you had three games at Wright State, three games at the Field House. Well, you had the Saturday game at the Field House too, and then you had the two games at Bowling Green as well. So I think they did a decent job of getting double headers, getting you able to see multiple games at one location. Like I said, not perfect, but for a first run, I think this could have been way rockier than what it actually ended up being.
Yeah, and one common, kind of complaint that I saw on Twitter was the fact that everybody was wondering why there weren't, as many games on Saturday. Where throughout the weekend we had six Final Four games on Friday, six Final Four games on Sunday, and then only two on Saturday. A lot of people were trying to figure out, hey, what's the logic behind that? Why are there not more games on Saturday? I was told that it had something to do with Spectrum and the TV schedule. Not sure how true or how accurate that is, but to me, it would make some sense. The fact that Spectrum, would be, broadcasting the girls' games down at Dayton, then they were, I'm not, did they do the Cam game?
I think they did every Final Four boys game. I think that's in their contract that
You got these guys in, three different places at once, I guess, but yeah, I don't know. That's just what I was told. Don't shoot the messenger, but it would be nice if we got some sort of clarity on that, maybe moving forward. But yeah, I mean, that like you said, it could have been a heck of a lot worse. Still got to see a lot of good games. Still got to see a lot of good teams that I wanted to watch and evaluate. So not a ton of complaints from me, but it is what it is.
no. I mean, if I'm going to complain, I'm going to try to be fair. Look at it from OHSAA's shoes. Think about why they made the choices that they did. And I mean, there's been a couple of minor things. I'm like, well, this hasn't been great. I wouldn't have done this, but all in all, I think even the stuff that I wouldn't have done has typically made sense. Like I go, oh, I understand why that happened and how they came to that conclusion. So, I mean, I would say it's been a successful first year in the transition. We'll see if you assume the seven divisions is here to stay. We'll figure out exactly how it looks next year. But yeah, like I mentioned, pretty successful first year. We've got to see a lot of good games. I think the Final Four weekend was a little interesting, but also I really didn't hate it just because I mean you got to see games on Friday and Sunday. Just continuing to add the amount of high level games that you can watch. I feel like we haven't lost that many of the like top game. I've watched just as many competitive playoff games this year as I would have in the four division format. I feel like absolutely.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think one thing that I'm curious to see is what attendance looks like, this weekend. Obviously, there's a few schools that I think are just going to show out regardless, right? Like Maysville, Monroe Central, Marion Local. I would assume that Division I game, with it being on a Saturday now and not a Sunday, we'll see pretty good attendance there. Um, but yeah, I don't know, a lot of speculation. I don't know if people are as excited um, about the weekend as they typically are. And I don't think it has much to do with the slate of games as much as it does people's just disdain towards, losing the semifinals, moving to seven divisions, and then now we're just getting all these championship games over 2 days. It's definitely for a lot of people who are used to it being one way. I think it definitely might deter them from coming out, but yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, and I mean that's a perfect transition. We've had some people ask what our favorite spots to go to in Dayton are. I mean, I think it's a pretty nice venue. I'm a little biased living in Cincinnati. A lot more convenient for me to get there from Cincinnati to Dayton than it is to Columbus. So I actually drew the lucky fortune for geography this time. But I got three spots I really like going to when I'm in Dayton. For pizza, I think Old Scratch Pizza is fantastic. There's a spot right outside of downtown Dayton. Really good. You got red sauce pizzas and white sauce pizzas. My favorite sit down restaurant in Dayton is Thai Nine. It's got fantastic options for Asian Thai food. I always get the crab fried rice. I get at a pretty high spice level because I enjoy that type of food, but overall, really good. Like overall ambiance at the restaurant. And then if you're just looking for something short, maybe in between games, quick, I think Bourbon Street Grill and Cafe. It's basically right on UD's campus, like right off of it. So not too far from UD Arena. You'll get to see a little bit more of the college buildings, the dorms, the lecture halls, and you'll get to see like what UD's actual campus looks like instead of just the arena. Just really good, like quick. If you want lunch, rice, chicken, beans, vegetables, I think Bourbon Street Cafe, great cornbread as well. Won't break the bank. Probably looking at $15 for a plate with two different meats, some vegetables, a side, and cornbread. That's not too bad. So if you're just looking for something quick, don't really care about sitting in a fancy restaurant, Bourbon Street Cafe is my favorite. TJ, what are some of your favorite spots in Dayton?
Oh man, before I give my two recommendations, man, I got to give a special rest in peace shout out to Tanks. Tanks was a staple for me anytime I was in the Dayton area. Was one of my favorite breakfast spots, not only in Southwest Ohio, but just across the state, period. Not sure if it's ever going to reopen under the new ownership or if it's just completely gone and ascended to purgatory or what. But man, yeah, we'll definitely miss going to Tanks, especially during those flying to the hoop weekends. But a place I like, man, it's definitely like a UD staple is Milano's. If you like pizza, just kind of like a sports bar type of, vibe and setup, it's probably where you'll find me Friday night after that Division II game. If you want more of a nice sit down restaurant, the Pine Club is about as high level as you'll get in Dayton. That receives the TJ Peatross NEO Spotlight stamp of approval. I believe it is still cash only. Don't quote me on that, but be prepared if you do go there that it may be cash only. But I promise it will be worth any inconvenience that you may experience from going to the ATM and pulling out cash. High level spot, definitely my favorite spot to eat in Dayton. So those would be my two recommendations.
Nice. So hopefully we see some Drive to Dayton listeners at a couple of those spots. I hope everybody enjoys state championship weekend. I feel like it's taken a while to get to this point. That was maybe the one negative of a week from regional finals and then another week from Final Four games to state title games. But we've made it. It's the end of a long run, a long grinding playoff time. I've spent a lot of miles in my car, and I'm not excited for it to be over, but I'm excited for the driving to be over and the long nights to be over. But I'm not excited for the crazy environments, the crazy endings, the great performances that I've seen in the month of March. So hopefully we get a couple classics at UD Arena. Got 7 games to do so. So we'll see. And I mean, let's just get into it. I think we should start off with the Division 1 game. I mean, we hinted on it a
I
little
mean,
bit earlier.
this is definitely it has felt like a bit of a collision course all season long. I believe these guys are, I forget how many miles actually are set apart, but I mean they're right down the road from each other pretty much. It can't be more than what 15-minute drive, 15-20 minute drive. I wouldn't think from Olentangy to Reynoldsburg.
Oh no, it's a lot more. I'll look it up real quick.
But I mean, the fact that these two guys, right, they have some history from, last year, playing that district final game. Olentangy Orange felt a little disrespected that Reynoldsburg jumped in their district. They made them pay for it, right, in a, bit of a blowout fashion in front of a sold out crowd. I do not think this is the same Reynoldsburg team that we saw last year, and I think they proved that time and time again, especially here in the tournament, winning a lot of these close matchups and showing a lot of fight down the stretch, showing that they can win and close out these games when their backs are against the wall. Um, man, I don't think I've looked forward to a state championship game as much as I have looked forward to this one and in a few years. So this is definitely number one on my list as far as the weekend goes. I think it's going to be a phenomenal way to end Saturday and to end the season. I don't think it gets any better than watching the two best teams in the state, regardless of division, just play each other, have a little bit of history on the line. There's going to be some chippiness there. There's going to be some excitement there. I mean, I'm expecting a really big crowd to show up. It should be a lot of fun. I'm going to stick with my gut, though. I do have Olentangy Orange and what I think will be a classic game, but I'm not shocked if Ronesburg finds a way to get this done.
I think last year when they played, I think both me and you took Reynoldsburg, and Stubbs was the only one to take Olentangy Orange in our district picks. Also, I did find 26 miles on the highway away from each other. But I know we're going to get the 270 people are not going to shut up if the game is good. I mean, they're just going to be so annoying, regardless of who wins. They're going to be talking about how great Central Ohio is, blah blah blah. So we'll have to deal with that, unfortunately, this weekend. But I mean, shout out 270. Just world revolves around Columbus. If you guys don't know, if you live in any other part of the state, but. I I'm going to stick with Olentangy Orange, but I mean, I don't think I'll ever feel good, even if they're up like 8 points with 2 minutes to go. I'll be like, well, Rollinsburg has come back every other time. Why would they not come back this time? So I don't know. I mean, I think that Orange has the right traits where they can beat you when Reynoldsburg, if they're a little sloppy defensively. I think Orange has the capable players and decision makers to really punish Reynoldsburg. But I mean, you just look at the firepower that Reynoldsburg has, especially if they're able to get easy buckets in transition. That's sort of been a differentiator for Reynoldsburg, especially against Hilliard Bradley and Olentangy Liberty. They're just able to get in transition. And when they get a dunk and then can set up their full court press, I mean, they're just such a tough team to play. But I'll stick with Olentangy Orange. They were my pick preseason. I had Reynoldsburg third in the state preseason, so heavyweight clash. We've been thinking this was possible since the moment we saw that you could have two Columbus teams in the state championship game, and here we are. So let's see what happens, man. In Division Two, Westerville North versus Maslin Perry. TJ, our Stark County Cinderella is the fat lady gonna sing on Friday night?
Oh man, I think that glass slipper is going to get knocked right off the foot, unfortunately. I think Westerville North is just cruising through Division Two, and I do not think it's going to stop on Friday. I think that this has potential and will likely be the most lopsided game of the weekend. I would love to be wrong, but just after watching Westerville North several times throughout the season, seeing Maslin Perry firsthand on Sunday, I think if Westerville North just plays their typical brand of basketball, I just don't see how Perry can withstand that press, that pressure. Those guards just kind of relentlessly coming at you on both ends of the floor. Just the tempo, I think that game will be way, way too fast for the Panthers. I'm taking Westerville North by a favorable margin, and hopefully going two for two. Man, I picked both Olentangy Orange and Westerville North in the preseason to win the state championships, and I'm going to stick with my gut, and I'm going to take North.
Yeah, I had Westerville North second in my preseason rankings, had Lima Senior at number one. So Westerville North, they've won every game by over 20 points this playoffs. Do you think it's over 20 or under 20?
Oh man, you're trying to set me up for some Twitter for some Twitter responses, man. Um,
I mean, it's very rare where you see a team win every game in the playoffs by over 20 points. Like even the past 2 years with Richmond Heights, Russia has kept them well inside 20 points. Westerville North is looking to do something that maybe Lutheran East did once in Division Three, but I feel like Harvest Prep or somebody always kept them tight. I don't know the last time. Maybe the first ever Richmond Heights D4 title when De'Eric and Dorian were freshmen. I feel like they won the state title game versus Tri Village by a lot. Might have won the Final Four game by a lot too. That probably is the last time anybody's won every game by 20 plus on route to a state
I
title.
think that's a good call, and you're probably right there. I don't know. I think Perry just has like a phenomenal story right now. Someone who's from Stark County who actually attended Perry High School. I know a lot of people that I've spoken to had plan on making the trip on Friday. So I think you'll actually see a pretty good crowd, pretty good turnout of Perry fans in the building for that. But I don't know. I think Westerville North is just kind of on a bit of a mission right now, and I don't think they're going to be stopped by anybody.
Yeah, I
So
agree. Another thing that somebody brought up on Twitter, this is going back to the Division One game. Olentangy Orange would be the first team to win the Division One state title while being unbeaten against Ohio foes since 2019 Moeller. And they'd be the first public school in over 20 years to do that. I couldn't find who the last public school was. I went all the way back to 2005. And
I'm
every
trying to think.
single
So yeah, with those Canton McKinley teams.
They always lost once. Like they lost to Lancaster one year. They lost to,
In the second year, they lost to, I believe, North College Hill with OJ Mayo and Bill
yeah.
Walker. So, yeah, I
And
mean
then
that was
Northland lost to, or not Northland. Who's the other Columbus school that won City League in 2002? It closed down. Brookhaven.
Brookhaven. Yeah,
They lost to Mifflin. That was their only loss in a year. So a bunch of public schools have come close, but I couldn't find the last public school that was undefeated against Ohio competition to win the state title. Moeller did it back to back years. They were unbeaten in 2019 and they were unbeaten against Ohio competition in 2018. So shout out Moeller. And so Orange looking to do something hasn't been done in 6 years, hasn't been done by a public school in probably 25, 30 years because I went all the way back. I couldn't find who Hamilton lost to in their state title game when they won it in 2004, I think. But they had three losses. So I doubt all three were to out of state opponents. So probably looking at something that hasn't happened in the 21st century. But we'll move on to the Division 3 game. This is a clash of styles. You know, you might have had the guard versus guard matchup. I think a lot of people were looking forward to if it was Marcus Johnson versus Jaden Arnold. That's what I predicted. I went with Garfield when we opened up the Final Four. TJ went with Louisville. He was right, man. That 12-0 run buried me, unfortunately. He looks with a smile on his face, but now we got the Leopards, you know, Bo Siegfried, Braden Gross. They've both been playing at a really high level. They're seniors. I mean, they barely play. I don't even know if they play anybody who isn't a senior, like maybe one junior. I don't know.
no,
Tadel Johnchik, Avery Andrachik, Ashton Marshall, other just senior glue guys who know
Ruben
their role.
Lister. Yeah, I think their top 7 or 8 guys are all seniors.
Yeah.
So
And they'll be
yeah,
taking on an Aiken squad that's got a lot of firepower. I mean, especially in the backcourt between Arnold, Burnett, and Antoine Hinton. I think the X factor in this game has to be Tavon Smith or DeAndre Carr Short. I mean, if either one of them can provide resistance against Braden Gross, I think Louisville is going to have a really hard time to score in the half court. But I mean, Gross absolutely took it to Garfield Heights. It really wasn't until the third or fourth quarter when Garfield started sending double teams they even started to slow him down. And that's when some of Louisville's other guys started knocking down open 3-point shots. So it's sort of a pick your poison with the Leopards. But if Tavon Smith or DeAndre Carshort can defend Gross one on one, I think that means Aiken is going to win. If they can't, then I think Louisville got a very good chance of winning this game. So that's the matchup that I'm looking forward to the most.
and I think we'll find out pretty early on in that game whether Aiken does have an answer for Gross or not. He was about as assertive offensively as I think I've ever seen him over the last 2 to 3 years. I mean, I believe he had 19 of the 31 at halftime against Garfield, and he was in attack mode. It felt like every possession, they were giving him the ball and just kind of getting out of the way and allowing him to go one-on-one with, whoever it was in front of him, whether it was Nazir Hines or somebody, whether it was a smaller guard or wing from Garfield. And man, it just seemed like he kind of was able to walk guys down, get good position, finish off 2 feet. So yeah, we're going to find out really quickly whether or not Aiken can handle Braden Gross or not. I'm going with Louisville. That was my preseason pick. I'm going to stick with my gut. I do think Aiken is capable of giving Louisville some matchup problems, especially in the backcourt. You're looking at two senior guards that combined average, I think, nearly 40 points between Jane Arnold and James Burnett. But yeah, I'm going with Louisville. They're going to need a third or perhaps a fourth guy to really step up in that one.
Moving to Division 4, we got Maysville going up against Glenville. I think this is a really interesting matchup. I think Glenville definitely has the physicality to make it difficult on Maysville. I mean, you look at their front court, Xavier Vickerstaff and Lorenzo Staley. Those are two guys with a lot of length defensively, a lot of size, senior strength. And then at the guard position, Theo Castro has really stepped up. They've got two freshmen that they can plug and play, another couple athletes on the wing as juniors and seniors. I mean, this Glenville team, they're athletic. They've been knocking on the door for it seems like a while. They finally broke through, absolutely dominated Hawken in the Final Four matchup. And I mean, they're going up against the Maysville squad that they've been here before. They start five juniors. I mean, Gator Nichols, most talented offensive player on the court. Jordan Watson has gotten better, and a couple of their other guys. I mean, I noticed that they just look way more physically advanced than what they were last year. Like some of these kids who either were the seventh, eighth man or the fifth starter on Maysville from last year, they just look a lot more prepared to play against athletes than what they were last year when it was sort of the Alex Bob, Gator Nichols with a little Jordan Watson show. I think their guys 3, 4, and 5 are much better this year, and that was probably the difference on why they finally got over the hump against a Wyoming squad that a lot of people had penciled in as the state title favorites in Division 4 once they got past Alter. So, I mean, this one could go either way. I think that we're going to be in for a good game. I do think that we saw on Sunday both of the Stark County teams won with a huge crowd advantage. Maysville is going to have a really, really big crowd advantage. We'll see how much that plays a factor.
One thing that really stood out to me when I went to the Maysville, Wyoming game was I expected Wyoming's guards, that guard trio of Devin Evans, Darren Gray, Kellen Wiley. Defensively, I thought they would kind of be able to wreak havoc a little bit, and then Maysville wouldn't be able to find their rhythm offensively. But man, I want to say Maysville only had 7 turnovers, and you consider the fact that they played 2 overtimes, that's pretty good considering who they were going against. And Wyoming actually had 14 turnovers. So that result was actually flipped from what I had expected going into it. But yeah, there were guys, man, that just made plays. Junior Kane roaring. He had, I think, 11 of their first 14 points for Maysville, had about 4 threes. Jordan Watson went 4 for 4 from behind the arc. I think Wyoming was so concerned of keeping Maysville off the 3-point line that I think they were a little hesitant to pressure them as much as I thought they were. Where I don't think Glenville is going to have that same hesitancy. I think Glenville is going to just get after it on the defensive end of the floor. And if Maysville gets a three, they get a three. But man, they're going to have a hell of a hard time finding one. I think Glenville is just so long and athletic and competitive. You mentioned Lorenzo Staley and Xavier Vickerstaff. Then you got guys like Arvell Nelson and Braylon Irby, just more long and athletic bodies. Um, I will be curious to see how Maysville does with that pressure, with that athleticism. I mean, I had those same question marks going into the Wyoming game, and I was wrong. Mind you, it took a Gator Nichols, buzzer beating three to do it, but they did it. So with that being said, I am going to go with Maysville. I think this is very much a coin flip game. And I think about the only thing that you can expect in this one is just a frantic, up and down, exciting brand of basketball. I think that's exactly what we're going to get.
I agree. I mean, I think both of us had Wyoming over Glenville in the state title game when we originally made our picks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, Maysville did take down the the team we both picked to win it all. So I think it would be tough to go against them. But yeah, like I mentioned, I think this Glenville team has more than a puncher's chance to win. Coming up next, Division 5. Whew, that's a big time matchup. A lot of future college talent on the floor. Uh, Columbus Academy, it's their first time on the stage. They were a team that they've been kind of knocking on the door. You mentioned Stubbs really liked them 2 years ago. They kind of had a disappointing playoff exit last year. And then this year, they have just been a buzzsaw cutting through anybody they face. Absolutely dominant wins. I mean, they've just taken it to Margaretta in the fourth quarter, Bishop Reedy the whole game, and Summit Country Day in the first half. I mean, none of these playoff games have been close with 2 minutes left in the contest. So, mad respect to Columbus Academy for taking care of business. You look at Lutheran East, they found themselves in a much tougher game than they were anticipating against Minford. Miles Montgomery had a three-pointer to send it to overtime at the Echo Center in St. Clairsville. Their duo of Montgomery and Bennett Kaiser absolutely put the team on their back and almost shocked Ohio against Lutheran East. I mean, that's just an incredible performance by them. Lutheran East did find a way to get the win. I think when you look at their depth of guards and their size, probably was the difference. Also, their 3-point shooting ability. They made a lot of shots at a high percentage against Minford. If you leave them open, they're going to knock them down. I mean, when you look at Dylan Ziegler, Muhammad Manigat, DJ Jenkins, too, like Ty Harrison, these are guys who will make you pay if you leave them open. But I
I
don't think,
believe Manigat had to sit for maybe the second half and the
oh,
tournament.
okay.
I do not believe that he's playing. He did not play in the Minford game unless he's injured. I would assume that he's out due to transfer. But yeah, that was a game that I was able to catch on Spectrum. Really fun, and at no point did it feel like Lutheran East was going to pull away or that it was just out of reach. I thought Minford had a really, really good shot, man. So not only did they have that chance to send it to overtime at the end, but I thought that, their shot selection throughout the course of the game, I didn't think was great. And I think, man, if they had just maybe cleaned it up a little bit, we're having a completely different conversation here. But shout out to those guys. I thought senior guard Miles Montgomery, who's going to West Liberty, that may have been one of the best games I've ever seen him play. Bennett Kaiser had a bit of a slow start, but then really picked it up in the second half. Phenomenal game, and Lutheran East, like you mentioned, shot it really well. I'm looking at these Columbus Academy scores right now, man. They 77 to 18, 71 to 15, 67-37.
Was that against Fairbanks?
It was 67-37.
And they had just beaten Harvest Prep and they had beaten Monroe Central earlier in the year. So that was a very legit team that what was it, 62-37?
No, 67-37. So I think
Oh
30.
my gosh.
Yeah, and then Columbus Academy over Margaretta by 17, over Bishop Reedy by 27, and then over Summit Country Day by 12. I mean, this team is playing as good of basketball as they have been all year. And honestly, I think they've just kind of slowly but surely gotten better as the years progressed. They have a unique combination of talented underclassmen with the likes of Caden Ivory, junior Jason Singleton. Then you have a handful of seniors that can just make winning plays, like we mentioned with Theo Falkenhayn, who was big in that Summit game. But then you look at guys like Anderson Davis, who was equally as big in the Margaretta game, and then guys like MJ Davis, who I think, have a chance to really bother and fluster TJ Crumble. And this is going to be a game where Lutheran East is going to have to make shots again. And if they don't, I think they may find themselves in a little bit of trouble here. I am going to stick with Lutheran East. I do think it's going to be one of the better games, if not the best game of the weekend. But I'm going to stick with the Falcons. Despite their youth, I think they've shown a lot of growth over the years. Well, give me Coach Liggins and company in a close one.
Oh, you're gonna stick with Lutheran East?
I'm sticking with Lutheran East, man. I can't
Mm.
go. I can't. I don't know. My gut is telling me Columbus Academy. My heart is telling me Lutheran East. I'm gonna stick with my heart. Stick with my preseason pick. I'm not gonna shy away from them now. But with Division 6, Rob, these are two teams that you're definitely a little more familiar with than I am. I know you've seen Marion Local this year. You have not seen Monroe Central, but just talk to us a little bit about what you think we can expect from that game, despite probably the most well-attended game of the weekend by a considerable margin.
Yeah, I think it'll be this game and the Division 1 game will receive the biggest crowds this weekend. Marion Local, I mean, they're kind of what you expect, football powerhouse, winning state title after state title on the gridiron. They're going to have physical kids at every spot. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're a 5'10" guard or a 6'3" power forward. You're going to be playing with physicality, strong, tough. They don't have a ton of shooters, but they don't really need a ton of shooters. I mean, Austin Niekamp is their guy. He usually has a considerable height advantage on most of the teams that they play in the high school MAC in Western Ohio. And I mean, he's done a great job this year protecting the rim, especially defensively. There's times where it seems like teams don't really want to dribble drive into the paint when Niekamp is in the game just because he takes up so much space with his length. He's also a big kid, like he's 6'8", and he's not a twig at all by any means. And a couple of their other guys who just play hard. I think that they got a sophomore for Marion Local. He starts, and uh, Kale Arns, I assume, has to be somehow related to Drake and Justin Harns from Versailles. But I mean, he's just another strongly built kid. Probably plays football, might play baseball too. I mean, it seems like a lot of these Marion Local kids from that part of the state are 2, 3 sport athletes. He played well in Marion Local's win over New Bremen in the game that I saw. And then when you look over on the Monroe Central side, they're led by a pair of seniors. Tucker Howell sort of gets the sort of notoriety. I believe he is their leading scorer, but they also have another senior in Chance Allen who is sort of a physical mismatch in Eastern Ohio. I mean, he's a kid who's more physically talented than a lot of the kids they go against. I was looking at their stats. Looks like he's pretty versatile as a scorer in the paint, rebounder, even throwing a couple assists, blocks, steals. Like he does a little bit of everything for Monroe Central. And then I assume it would be Tucker's little brother, Cooper, is a sophomore. I believe he's their third leading scorer. But when you look at this Monroe Central squad, I was surprised how close the game against Kirtland was. And Kirtland has, I assume, similar athletes to Marion Local. Kirtland's another football powerhouse. They consistently make it to the state title game on the gridiron. And Monroe Central had a lot of trouble with them. I thought that would be a 15 to 20 point win. It was a tough game from start to finish. I don't think that bodes well for how Monroe Central is looking in this one. I originally picked Monroe Central over Marion Local, but I'm not feeling very good about that pick. I'm not going to change it, but I think if you gave me a do-over, I would probably lean with the Flyers of Marion Local just because I figured Monroe Central would easily handle Kirtland, and I think Marion Local is a similar style team, but with a couple guys who can push them over the top of what Kirtland had, and that might be the difference.
And then as we move on to Division 7, we were talking about the margin of victory with those Columbus Academy wins. You look at what Rushi has done, not only just in the tournament, but throughout the entire season. It's been rather remarkable, man. But just sticking with the tournament, they 86-28, 61-30, 83-45, 55-16, 58-30 over Botkins. That to me, that was the real, eye catcher. And then they turn around 66-44 over Arlington in the semis, and now, they're facing Cornerstone Christian in the second to last game of the weekend. I think the storylines going into this one are pretty fun. I think a lot of people are, excited to see Quinn Kwasniak, aka Turtle, Ohio's new all-time leading scorer. I think it's going to be kind of, even though he's a senior, I think it's going to be his coming out party a little bit. Just the fact that he plays all the way up in Willoughby, they don't play in many events or on, too many big stages here in Ohio. It's going to be a lot of people's first time getting eyes on him. And he's going to have his hands full against a strong, tough, really good defensive, squad in Rushi. Um, I think this game has the potential to be competitive for 2 to 3 quarters. I will be shocked if Cornerstone is able to just, last, in this game for 32 minutes. I'm going to go with Rushi. I think they're going to cap off a perfect season, and they're going to finally get themselves a state championship after losing to Richmond Heights these last 2 seasons.
I mean, I actually didn't realize they beat Arlington by over 20 points. They're another team that could win every playoff game by 20 points this year.
17, 61-44, so it was close.
Oh, I thought it was 66-44. My apologies. But yeah, Rushi has been dominating teams. I will be curious to see just how they defend a guy like Kwasniak. I doubt they've played anybody close to as talented offensively this year that can just single-handedly take over a game. So I'll be curious to see if they run any like box and one or like sort of junkyard defenses at Kwasniak, sort of try and make other people beat them. Because Kwasniak did a good job against South Webster getting himself open. I watched the highlights that Zach Fleer 270 Hoops posted. And I mean, they ran some really nice sets to get him open. I mean, Babe can drum up on a clipboard, get his teams excited and ready to go. But the one thing Cornerstone can't do, they gave up 26 points in the first quarter to South Webster. If you do that against Rushi, it's going to be curtains. You're not going to be able to come back like you did against South Webster. Credit to Cornerstone. They quickly clawed back into the game. I think they were tied going into halftime. But if you have a similar defensive effort in the first 8 minutes, you won't be able to recover against Rushi. So that's what I'm looking forward to the most in that game. Can Cornerstone come out with aggressiveness defensively and hang in there? Like if they're down 2 points after the first quarter, I'll be like, all right, they weathered the storm. Let's see if Kwasniak can sort of get into a rhythm and put the team on the back because I think Rushi is as hard to come back. I mean, that they play so physical. They're going to wear you down. It's going to be tougher to score on them in the fourth quarter than it is the first quarter. So you got to get up on them early because if you fall behind, it's going to be curtains quickly. One thing that has drawn a lot of chatter in the Ohio high school basketball scene was about Mr. Basketball, and Kwasniak was a noticeable person who was not on the finalist list. We were kind of talking about this at Canton, and I mean, you could make a case for a ton of kids to be nominated, but I think me and you came to the agreement that our top three would be Marcus Johnson, Devin Brown, and Cam Elwer. Like those were the three that I think were non-negotiables, had to be nominated. Were the three kids I would put top three for the award. And they were all on it. So I think you could make a case for a lot of kids who were either put on the list or left off the list to be nominated. But I think in the end, those are the three with the healthiest cases, and I would vote for Marcus Johnson as Mr. Basketball.
He would get my vote as well. And this has been another episode of Drive to Dayton. Hopefully, we actually will see some of you guys in Dayton. Like I said, I'll be at Milano's enjoying a pizza after the game's Friday night. If you're around, feel free to come in, talk to us about, the games that just took place, about Saturday's games, talk about whatever you want. I'll be there. I'm not sure if Roth will be joining me or not, but that is where you will find me on Friday. Until then, we will see you guys next week.